Alright class, so this lesson is gonna be on solving quadratic equations by factoring and finding x-intercepts in the calculator. So these are two different ways we're gonna solve equations. In the previous lesson, I taught you how to solve by using the quadratic formula and also by taking the square root of both sides. So these are the other two ways to solve the equations. All right, so the first one, solving quadratic equations by factoring. So our first step is to factor the polynomial. Okay, so it says, if it's not already factored, so we have here x squared minus 2x minus 8, and I believe in lesson 2 you learned how to factor. So to factor this trinomial, I'm going to write the negative 8 or the c. Remember that this is excuse me, let me zoom in. Remember that this is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So what I'm going to write here is the c, which is negative 8. Remember to carry the sign. And then down here I'm going to write b, which is negative 2. And then I'm going to try to think of two numbers that multiply together. They give me negative 8, but when they add together, give me negative 2. That would be 4 times 2. Negative 4 times positive 2 gives you negative 8. Negative 4 plus 2 gives you negative 2. So these are my numbers. Alright, so now I can factor this. We're going to say x minus 4 and then x plus 2. Now it's factored. Now I'm going to set this factor equal to 0. I just did that. And then set each factor equal to 0. So now I'm going to break up the factors. I'm going to say x minus 4 equals to 0, comma, and then x plus 2 equals to 0. So this will help me to find both of my solutions. And then we're going to just, my step 4 is solve each equation separately to find your solutions. So I'm just going to solve for x. So you have x equals 0 plus 4 is 4. That's one of my solutions. And then the other one is x equals negative 2. That's the other solution. Step 5, write your answer in set notation. So you know set notation, we just list out the answers. So you have negative 2 and 4. We like to write it in increasing order. Alright, so these ones, they're already factored for you, so which means that now I just have to set each factor equal to 0 and then solve. And that's it. You can try this one, and then for this one, let me again, it's already in factored form, so I just have to set each factor equal to 0. Here I'm going to subtract 8 and then divide by 5. And then b equals negative 1. Write it in set notation. So you have negative, I guess this is smaller, negative 8 over 5 and then negative 1. If you wrote this number first and this number second, that's fine, as long as you get the correct answers. Okay. Alright, so here's some more different examples how to solve equations. Here you're going to have to factor it out and then set each equal to 0, and that's just the same example as the previous one. So let me move on to number 7. So here, it's also in factored form. You have this x out here, but let me just put it in parentheses so you can see that it is a factor, which means that I still have to set each factor equal to 0. So you have x equals 0, and then x plus 2 equals 0. This is already solved. Over here, I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides, so you have x equals negative 2. So my answers are negative 2 and 0. Over here, this one is not factored, but I see that in these two terms I have a common factor of x, so I'm going to factor it out. So if I factor out x from here, I have x remaining, minus factor out x from here, I have negative 3. And that's equals to 0. And then so you have x equals 0, and then x minus 3 equals 0. This has two factors. Same thing here. So again, in these two terms, I have x by itself, but I do not have it set equal to 0. I have to make sure to first set it equal to 0, and then you can factor it. So to set it equal to 0, I'm going to subtract 20 on both sides, set equation equal to 0. Set equation equal to 0, so that's the first step. To do that, just move everything from the right side over. And then you have x squared plus x minus 20 equals 0. And then now we have to factor this out. So I'm going to write my constant term c, negative 20 up here, and then you have 1 down here. So what two numbers multiplied together give you negative 20, 5 times negative 4, and then 5 plus 5 plus negative 4 is positive 1. So now I'm going to write it as a factor. So you have x plus 5 and then you have x minus 4, and that equals to 0. Now we have to set each factor equal to 0. So you're going to do x plus 5 equals to 0. I'm just going to come up here. And then you have x minus 4 equals to 0. Solve it. X equals 4. And then, so my solutions are negative 5 and positive 4. Okay? Alright, I'm going to now go to the graphing portion. So, now to solve equations by graphing, all you're going to do is take your equation, plug it into your calculator, and the point here is to look for x-intercepts. Okay, where does it cross the x-axis? Okay, I have some instructions here exactly how to calculate the zero. We call that a zero of a function. So whenever you have a function crossing the x-axis, it has several different names. We call it x-intercepts, and we'll talk more about that later, but just know the terms we use for it. X-intercepts, sometimes we call them zeros of a function, because that's where your function equals y equals 0. Sometimes we call them solutions. Sometimes we call them roots. Okay, we'll get more into this, but for this purpose, in the calculator, we want to select the 0, meaning that this means x-intercepts. This is to find x-intercepts. Okay, I'm not going to go through the steps to show you how to calculate it in your the TI-84 calculators, but I will show you how do we find x-intercepts on Desmos. Okay, and it's actually a lot easier on Desmos. Okay, I'm not going to show you on here. this calculator. I'm going to go to Desmos. But before I do that, let me go to the practice page. So there's a bunch of steps to do this on the TI calculator, okay? But now let's go to your Desmos calculator, and we are going to try to find the x-intercepts on this. So you're just going to simply take your function and plug it in here, plug it as y equals, literally just typing it in here, minus 2x minus 8, okay? And then Desmos already finds the x-intercept. It's right there. It puts a point. There's your x-intercept. So the solution to this problem, as long as you typed it in correctly, which I didn't. There we go. It's right here. Negative 1.33. So one of my solutions is negative 1.33, comma, and here's your other solution at 2. Notice what your y coordinate is. When your x coordinate is this, and then when your y coordinate is zeros, we call that the zeros of a function. Also, we call that x-intercepts. Okay? And also the main one is those are your solutions. And that's pretty much it for that. Let me just try one more example. Let's do a multiple choice one. So you have 5x squared minus 13x minus 6. It's right there. And then you have a 0 at negative 0.4, and you have a 0 at 3. It's going to be A. If you notice, if you put 2 over 5, it's in decimal form is negative 0.4, which is right there. Okay? That's it. Thanks.